There once lived a woman named Maria, known far and wide for her beauty. She lived in a small village near a winding river in the heart of Mexico. Many men desired her, but none caught her eye, until one day, a wealthy traveler rode into town. He was charming, handsome, and unlike anyone Maria had ever met. They fell in love quickly and soon married. Maria bore him 2 children, and for a time they were happy. But happiness, as it often does, began to fade. The man started to travel more often. When he returned, he barely looked at her. His affections turned cold, and whispers said he had found someone else, someone younger, wealthier. One evening, Maria saw him in town, with another woman. He didn't acknowledge her or the children. He passed her by as if she were nothing. Her heart cracked. Blinded by pain and fury, Maria took her 2 children to the edge of the river. The same river where they had once laughed and played. And in her grief, in a moment of madness, she held them tight, then let them go. The silence after the splash was deafening. When she realized what she had done, her scream echoed through the hills. She ran into the water, desperate to save them, but it was too late. They were gone. Her cries tore through the night as she stumbled along the banks, calling their names over and over, "Ay, mis hijos," my children. The villagers found her days later, lifeless, still dressed in white, by the river where her children had drowned. But Maria's soul did not rest. To this day, people say they hear her cries near rivers and lakes, especially at night. They call her La Llorona, the weeping woman. Dressed in a tattered white gown, with a veil hiding her face, she wanders the land, cursed to search for her lost children. And if you hear her cries, soft at first, then closer, you must run. Because if La Llorona mistakes you for one of her own, she might take you with her. It was a moonless night when Javier left the cantina. His boots echoed down the dirt road as he stumbled past the edge of town, pockets empty and heart full of anger. He had gambled away the last of his father's money again, and there'd be hell to pay if he returned home with nothing. As he reached the fork in the road, something strange happened. The wind stopped, the crickets fell silent, and from the shadows came the sound of hooves, slow and deliberate. A tall figure emerged, mounted on a massive black horse. The man wore an immaculate black charro suit embroidered with silver, and his face was hidden beneath the brim of a wide sombrero. His presence felt wrong, too perfect, too still. Javier took a step back. The rider spoke. "You seem troubled, amigo." Javier didn't answer. "What if I could offer you a way out? Gold, luck, respect, everything you've ever wanted." The man reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather pouch. It jingled, heavy with coins. Gold coins, real ones. Javier stared. He wanted to say no, but the memory of his father's scowl and his own bruised pride made the decision for him. "What's the catch?" he asked. The rider smiled, though his eyes remained in shadow. "Nothing, for now. All I ask is that you never forget who gave you this gift." Javier took the pouch. From that night on, his life changed. Money came easily, women, fame, respect. He became rich beyond anything he had dreamed. But with each passing day, he felt a presence behind him, a shadow that never quite left. One evening, years later, he tried to toss the pouch away, but no matter where he buried it or how far he ran, it always returned, on his pillow, in his coat pocket, or hanging from the doorknob. Until one night, the black horse returned. No words were spoken. The man in black held out his hand, and Javier understood. You never escape a deal with El Charro Negro. You can only delay the payment. They say the Charro still roams the roads of Mexico, appearing to the desperate and greedy. He always offers a solution, always with a smile, and always with a price. In the heart of Puebla, Mexico, there stood an abandoned colonial house, its windows boarded, its walls cracked, its door forever sealed with a rusted chain. Locals called it La Casa de la Nahuala, the House of the Nahuala. Children were dared to walk past it, but none ever touched the gate, because everyone knew what happened there. Many years ago, the house belonged to a woman named Doña Eduviges, who lived alone. She never aged. People whispered she was a Nawala, a witch who could leave her body at night and transform into a ball of fire or a black animal. It was said she had made a pact with the devil in exchange for eternal youth and power. Children began to go missing in the neighborhood, always at dusk, always near the house. Their parents searched high and low, but the children were never seen again. Some claimed to hear their screams echoing from inside the walls. Others said the witch was harvesting their souls, trapping them in dolls and jars that she kept hidden deep in the house's cellar. Then one night, the house burst into flames. When the townspeople arrived, they found no fire, only thick black smoke pouring from every window. The front door creaked open on its own. No one dared step inside. Since then, the house has remained empty, or mostly empty. They say if you stand near it at night, you can hear the floorboards creaking, though no one walks inside. Whispers echo from the rooms, childlike and desperate. And every so often, someone swears they see a pale face peering from the second-floor window, watching, waiting, for someone foolish enough to break the chain. Because the Nawala still lives, and she's always hungry. Late one night, in a quiet hospital ward in Mexico City, a young nurse named Carla was making her rounds. The floor was calm, only a few elderly patients and one new arrival, a boy in critical condition. Carla was tired, her feet sore, her eyes heavy. As she turned the corner into room 7, she froze. A nurse she didn't recognize was already there, tending to the boy. The woman wore a spotless white uniform, so crisp it looked freshly ironed. Her silver nameplate caught the hallway light, but the name was too faded to read. Carla blinked. The woman was gone. Confused, she asked the other nurses, but no one had seen anyone enter the room. The next morning, the boy, who was expected to worsen, was suddenly stable, smiling, healthy. His parents cried with joy. "I saw her," he said, pointing to the door. "The nurse in white. She held my hand and told me I would be okay." Carla didn't sleep well that night. Decades earlier, legend says, there was a nurse named Eulalia who worked in that very hospital. She was known for being neat, efficient, and obsessively clean, her uniform always perfectly pressed. But her heart was cold. She treated patients with little compassion. One day, she fell in love with a doctor. She imagined a life with him, planned a wedding in her mind, but the doctor never returned her feelings. He left the hospital, never saying goodbye. Eulalia snapped. She let a patient die by neglecting his medication. Some say she let more than one die. Guilt consumed her, and soon after she was found dead in her apartment, still wearing her uniform, perfectly ironed. Since then, patients on the brink of death have claimed to be visited by La Planchada, the Ironed Lady. She appears quietly, gently, always in that perfect white uniform. Sometimes she brings healing. Other times, she comes for those who have no chance left. But always, she leaves without a trace. Some nurses say they've seen her too, crossing the hallway, entering a locked room, or standing beside a patient right before the monitors go flat. So if you're ever in a hospital in Mexico and wake up to see a glowing, silent nurse with a uniform too clean to be real, you may already be too late. They say you don't hear El Silbón right away. First, the air turns heavy, like it's pressing against your chest. Dogs begin to cry and hide under porches. The wind dies. Trees stop moving. The whole world feels like it's holding its breath. Then, you hear it. A whistle. 7 slow notes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, again, again, always the same. The terrifying part? If it sounds loud and close, you're probably safe. But if it's faint, far away, like it's coming from the horizon, he's already behind you. He wasn't born a ghost. Long ago, in the flat plains of Venezuela and northern Mexico, there lived a spoiled boy. One evening he demanded deer meat from his father. When the man came home empty-handed, the boy snapped. That night, he slit his father's throat, then carved up the body, made his mother cook it. She didn't realize what she had done, until she found her husband's wedding ring at the bottom of the stew pot. Horrified, she cursed her son. His grandfather tied the boy to a post, whipped him until the skin hung from his back, rubbed salt and hot peppers into the wounds, then set the dogs on him. They say he died in pieces, but something evil rose from those pieces. Now he wanders the night, tall, skeletal, his bones creaking with every step. He wears filthy rags and carries a sack filled with bones. Some say they're his father's. Others say they're from the men he's killed. He targets the cruel, the drunk, the wicked. But sometimes he comes for the lonely. So if you're ever out at night and the wind dies, and you hear those 7 notes, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, don't move, don't speak, and never ever look back, because El Silbón is already there, and he's counting your bones.
There is an island deep within the canals of Xochimilco, south of Mexico City. It's not listed on tourist maps. Most boatmen avoid it unless specifically asked. Those who do pass near it lower their voices and refuse to dock. Because on that small piece of land, surrounded by still black water and tangled roots, hang hundreds of dolls, rotting, broken, watching. But they are not toys. They are guardians. Or maybe, prisoners. The story begins decades ago with a man named Don Julian Santana, a quiet, solitary man who abandoned city life to live alone on the island. People say he went mad, that he began hearing voices. But Julian claimed the truth was much worse. He said the island was haunted. One day, he found the body of a young girl floating in the water near the island. She had drowned, tangled in the lilies, her face pale, her hair spread out like black lace in the water. Julian pulled her from the canal, but it was too late. He buried her beneath the trees and whispered a prayer. The next day, a doll floated to shore. Waterlogged, glass-eyed, staring. He took it as a sign and hung it in a tree as an offering to the girl's restless spirit. But the whispers didn't stop. More dolls appeared. In the water. On the banks. Sometimes with missing limbs, sometimes with their heads turned the wrong way. Julian began collecting them, hanging them from every branch. Dolls with broken faces, blackened skin, cracked skulls. He believed they protected him. Others say they watched him. He lived like that for decades, surrounded by dolls, talking to them, answering their whispers. Tourists who came by boat said they heard giggles, saw the doll's eyes follow them. Julian swore the girl's spirit was still there, and that she was angry. Then, one day, Julian was found dead, face down in the canal, in the exact same spot where the girl had drowned. Since then, no one has dared live on the island. But the dolls remain. Their faces are cracked by weather, their bodies bloated with rot, yet they never fall. And at night, the wind carries soft giggles, sometimes weeping, sometimes, something else. Visitors say that when they step onto the island, they feel watched. They say if you stare too long into a doll's eyes, it blinks. If you whisper, it listens. And if you take a doll, you won't leave alone. Some believe Julian never died. That he became part of the island. That his spirit lives within one of the dolls, forever hanging, forever watching, forever waiting. So if you ever ride a trajinera through the Xochimilco canals and come across a little island dripping with dolls, don't touch anything. Don't whisper. And for God's sake, don't stay past sundown. There are roads in the mountains of Central America and southern Mexico that you never walk at night, not even under a full moon, not even with a flashlight. The locals don't need signs to warn you. They have stories. They speak of El Cadejo. He comes as a dog, but not the kind you've ever seen. Large as a bull, blacker than the night, with eyes that burn like coals and hooves instead of paws. You hear him before you see him, slow, steady footsteps behind you. Never running. Just walking. Waiting. There are two cadejos in the legends. The white cadejo protects the innocent, guards travelers, and wards off evil. But the black cadejo is something else. Some say he was once a man who sold his soul for vengeance. Others say he's the devil himself, taking the shape of a beast to stalk the wicked. He targets those who stray from the path, drunkards, liars, the abusive, and the unfaithful. But sometimes, just being alone is enough. One night, a young man named Ramon stumbled out of a cantina after midnight. He had fought with his father, hit his younger brother, and left home swearing he'd never return. As he walked down the dirt path through the forest, he heard it, soft hoofsteps behind him. He turned. Nothing. He walked faster. So did the footsteps. Then he saw the shadow. Eyes like embers. A mouth that didn't bark, just growled low, like thunder rolling through your bones. It didn't attack. It circled. It smiled. By morning, Ramon was found curled up by the roadside, eyes open, hair turned white, lips frozen in a silent scream. His bones had cracked from within, as if crushed by fear itself. Sometimes, the cadejo does not kill right away. He follows. Weeks. Months. You'll hear the steps behind you no matter where you are, at work, in bed, in crowded streets. People begin to see things moving in the shadows behind you. Dogs refuse to come near. Mirrors reflect something you can't see. And then, one night, you hear the footsteps as you turn. There's nothing. Because he's already inside you. So if you're ever alone at night and hear slow steps behind you, don't look. Don't run. Because El Cadejo doesn't chase. He follows. And he only stops when you're done running from what you deserve. The animals were found just before sunrise. 12 goats, 2 dogs, and a cow, all lying perfectly still in the dry grass of a ranch in northern Mexico. Their bodies were unmarked. No torn flesh, no blood trails. But when the rancher cut one open, it was completely drained. Not a drop of blood. Not a single vein left full. That was the first sign that chupacabras was back. It started in the 1990s, near the border with Puerto Rico. Farmers would wake to find their animals dead, eyes open, faces twisted in terror. Always the same, 3 puncture marks on the neck, and no blood. As if something had sucked them dry. People called it El Chupacabras, the goat sucker. At first, no one believed it. Scientists blamed disease, cults, even coyotes. But nothing explained the lack of blood, the precision of the wounds, or the horrible smell left behind, like sulfur and rotten eggs. Then people began to see it. A creature, small but muscular, hunched like a gargoyle. Scales instead of fur. Red eyes. Long fingers with claws sharp enough to peel flesh like fruit. It moved too fast to catch. Sometimes it stood on 2 legs, sometimes 4. And its face wasn't quite animal. It was intelligent. And it watched. In a village outside Monterrey, a woman named Dona Marisol swore she saw it the night her chickens died. It was crouched on the roof, licking blood from the shingles with a forked tongue. When she screamed, it hissed and leapt into the trees, vanishing without a sound. Days later, her grandson found small footprints around the coop. Like a child's, but clawed. Marisol began leaving offerings, raw meat, bone broth, animal hearts. For months, nothing died. Then one night, she forgot. The next morning, she found her dog, lifeless, his neck pierced neatly. And on her front door, 3 long scratches. The government called it hysteria. Hoaxes. But reports kept coming, from farms, cities, even the mountains. Security cameras caught brief flashes, a blur, a claw, glowing eyes. Military patrols found strange tracks in dry riverbeds that suddenly stopped, as if the creature had taken flight. One soldier disappeared without a trace, the others refused to talk. Even now, ranchers still whisper about it. Livestock die, bloodless. Dogs bark at nothing. Shadows move where they shouldn't. And always, 3 holes on the neck. Always. They say the chupacabras doesn't just hunt for food. It watches for those who see it, and leave their doors unlocked. In the heart of Guanajuato, among its maze of narrow alleys and pastel buildings, there is one passage so narrow that 2 balconies from opposite sides almost touch. It's called El Callejón del Beso, the Alley of the Kiss. The legend says that couples who kiss on the 3rd step will have 7 years of happiness. It's a popular spot, filled with laughter and love. But the truth behind the name is a tragedy soaked in blood. Long ago, a girl named Carmen lived in the house overlooking the alley. Her father, a cruel man obsessed with money and reputation, had promised her hand to a wealthy old noble. Carmen, however, had fallen in love with Luis, a poor miner who would come by at dusk and serenade her beneath her window. When her father found out, he beat her and locked her inside the house. He threatened that if he ever saw Luis again, he would kill her. But Carmen and Luis were desperate. So Luis rented the small room in the building across the alley. From his tiny balcony, he could reach across and touch her fingers through the iron railing. They kissed for the first time over that narrow gap, silent and trembling. Every night, they met in secret. Fingers intertwined. Lips brushing. Eyes full of fear. Until the night Carmen's father returned early. He heard the soft murmur outside, the creak of the balcony floorboards. He didn't shout. He didn't warn. He grabbed a dagger from the kitchen and climbed the stairs like a shadow. By the time Carmen saw him, it was too late. The dagger pierced her chest from behind. Her blood spilled across the balcony and splashed onto Luis's outstretched hand. She died in his arms, their lips barely inches apart. Luis vanished. Some say he jumped from the roof in grief. Others say he cursed the alley before fleeing the city. Today, the spot remains a tourist destination. Lovers still kiss on the 3rd step, laughing at the legend. But some leave with bruises on their backs, cold air at their necks. In the heart of Guanajuato, nestled between Baroque churches and cobblestone alleys, stands the crumbling remains of an old convent, San Francisco de Asís. Locals avoid it after sundown. Not because of rats or decay, but because of the monk who still walks its corridors, a monk who died centuries ago. They call him El Monje Blanco, the white monk. Legend says that during the 1700s, a pious friar named Fray Baltazar lived within those convent walls. Known for his purity and discipline, he wore robes so starkly white that they glowed under candlelight. But what few knew was that behind his sermons and sacraments, Fray Baltazar carried a secret obsession. One night, he heard the confessions of a young novice, Sister Clara. She admitted that she had fallen in love with a villager. Their forbidden romance had turned physical, and she feared she was pregnant. Rather than absolve her, Baltazar was consumed by a jealous rage. He had wanted her for himself, in silence, in darkness. He lured her into the catacombs beneath the convent on the pretense of prayer and penance. No one heard her scream. When her body was found, twisted and bloodied near the stone altar below, Fray Baltazar denied everything. But the guilt overwhelmed him. Days later, he hanged himself from the bell tower, his white robes fluttering like a flag of surrender. But death gave him no peace. Since then, El Monje Blanco is seen drifting down the cloisters and corridors of the ruined convent, his face hidden beneath his hood. Those who've entered the catacombs have felt a chill, a pull, as if something wants to confess to them. Some leave sobbing without knowing why. Others come out changed, quiet, cold, hollow-eyed. Tourists report seeing a white-robed figure reflected in glass, even when no one is behind them. Candles blow out without wind. Shadows move on their own. One teenage boy who dared to explore the convent during Holy Week was found unconscious near the altar. When he awoke, he kept repeating one thing. He said it wasn't murder, it was love. They say if you hear a baby crying outside your window at night, don't open the door. And if you hear an owl whistle 3 times in the dark, don't answer back. Because it isn't a child. And it isn't an owl. It's La Lechuza, and she's hunting. In a dusty village near the Tamaulipas border, old Dona Pilar was the only one still feeding the altar candles at dusk. Everyone else had boarded up their windows and left offerings of salt by their doors. They knew what was coming. The dogs had stopped barking. The wind had turned warm and sour, like spoiled meat. Even the roosters fell silent. That night, 17-year-old Javier was driving home from his girlfriend's house, too proud to admit he was scared. He laughed when she told him not to whistle. It attracts her, she'd said. She thinks you're mocking her call. But that was just superstition. Right? He rolled down the window, lit a cigarette, and whistled into the night, 3 short bursts. The desert air grew colder. Something massive swooped over the truck. Feathers scraped the windshield. Javier slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. In the rearview mirror, something moved, something huge perched on a cactus. At first it looked like an owl. But it was far too big. Its wings stretched wider than the road. Its eyes glowed yellow, intelligent, angry. And then he saw its face. A woman's face. Pale. Wrinkled. Smiling with jagged, black teeth. La Lechuza. Legend says she was once a bruja, burned or hanged for practicing dark magic. In death, her spirit merged with the shape of an owl, one with a woman's face and unnatural size. She flies over town seeking revenge, stealing children, dragging men into the sky. Some say she returns to punish the wicked. Others say she takes the innocent, just to feel powerful again. Either way, her scream, a shrill mix of woman and bird, can split eardrums. Her wings stir up sandstorms. Her talons pierce bone. Javier never made it home. They found his truck the next morning, still running, door flung open, claw marks along the roof. Inside, feathers soaked in blood and a single strand of long, gray hair. The old woman, Dona Pilar, wept at her altar. She said he brought it on himself. You don't whistle at night. You don't mock the wind. You don't walk alone under the stars where she flies. Weeks later, more reports came in. Livestock torn open. Infants missing from their cribs. Screeching in the sky. And always, the sound of wings against the glass. Some say if you pour salt across your windowsill, she can't cross. Others hang scissors above the door. But no one really knows what stops her. All they know is, when the wind dies, and the night goes still, and you hear the flutter of wings overhead. You pray. You do not speak. And above all, you never, ever whistle back. In the deserts of Zacatecas, where cantinas glow red with cheap neon and tequila burns like gasoline, there's a story that men only whisper when drunk enough to forget what fear tastes like. They call her La Mujer Herada, the iron-hoofed woman. And if you see her, it's already too late. Back in the 1960s, in a mining town called Villa de Cas, there was a cantina named El Diablo's Respiro. It was a place where miners blew their pay, married men forgot their vows, and bar fights ended with blood in the dust. That's where Tono met her. He'd been drinking since sundown, laughing with friends, bragging about his conquests, the women he used and discarded. He was married, but that never stopped him. When she walked in, everything stopped. Even the jukebox skipped. She didn't belong there. She had skin like moonlight, long black hair, and a red dress that clung like smoke. Her eyes were hollow, bottomless, and she smiled like she knew exactly who he was. Tono, ever the arrogant fool, offered to buy her a drink. She said nothing. Just smiled. Then extended her hand. They danced. She didn't blink. Didn't sweat. Moved like silk and shadow. The other patrons watched in silence, their drinks trembling. The lights flickered. The temperature dropped. Then someone screamed. Tono's boots had shattered. Splinters of leather littered the floor. Beneath them were hoofprints, iron, searing hot, melting into the wood. He looked down. Her legs were no longer human. They ended in hooves, burned black and bound in rusted iron. Smoke rose from the floor as she dipped him low and whispered. "You're mine now." The cantina exploded into screams. Tono tried to break free, but her grip was inhuman. Her nails dug into his skin, drawing blood. The men who tried to help were thrown back by an invisible force. One cracked his skull against the jukebox, another went blind. They say the lights burst. The walls shook. And when silence fell again, she was gone. All that remained were scorched hoofprints across the floorboards, and Tono's wedding ring, twisted and melted into the wood. Weeks passed. Tono's wife wept at the church steps, her hands shaking as she clutched a candle. One night, she heard the front gate creak. She ran outside, hoping, praying. And there he stood. Pale. Eyes sunken. Lips cracked. He didn't speak. Didn't move. Just stared. Then she saw it. Hoofprints in the dirt behind him. She slammed the door. Locked every window. But every night since, he comes back. Just standing at the gate. Never blinking. Never speaking. Waiting. They say La Mujer Herada is the devil in disguise, sent to punish men who lie, cheat, or hurt women. She appears beautiful, tempting, irresistible, until it's too late. Then the iron hooves come, and the fire follows. So if you're drinking alone in a back alley bar and a woman in red asks for a dance, look at her feet first. If you hear metal against stone, and the scent of sulfur follows, run. Because when the music fades and the dance ends, she never lets go. In the ranches scattered across northern Mexico, children are warned not to wander too far at dusk, especially when the wind is dry and the goats are restless. That's when it hunts. That's when El Chupacabras wakes. The first signs are always the same. Animals refuse to eat. Cows back into corners, eyes wide. Dogs bark at nothing, then suddenly go silent. Then, in the morning, someone finds a goat dead in the field, completely drained of blood. Not torn apart. Not chewed. Just two perfect puncture marks at the neck. As if something had fed. And left it cold. The elders say the creature came from the south, born of black magic or cursed science, possibly conjured by a failed military experiment or summoned by brujas in a blood ritual. No one agrees where it came from. Only that it is real. And it is hungry. On a ranch outside Monclova, the Vargas family kept over 50 goats. One by one, they started dying. Each morning, Don Luis would find another carcass, rigid, pale, not a drop of blood inside. No signs of struggle. No tracks. Until the night he stayed up. Don Luis waited with a rifle, sitting by the barn with only the moon and a lantern. Around 2 a.m., the animals went wild, screaming, kicking, bleeding. The wind died. The air turned foul. And then he saw it. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't a coyote. It was standing. Bent forward, thin, gray-skinned, the size of a small man. Its eyes glowed red like burning coals. Spikes ran down its back, and its fingers ended in long, curling claws. But it didn't roar. It clicked, like insect wings, and glided over the fence. Don Luis raised his rifle. It was gone before he could shoot. A blur of claws and stench and hunger. He ran to the barn. One goat, still alive, lay on its side, legs twitching. But even as he watched, its eyes dulled, and 2 small holes in its throat bled, nothing. Dry. Completely empty. That was the last night Don Luis lived on the ranch. He sold the land, packed up his family, and moved into town. He warned the next owner, never stay up after midnight. Never ignore the animals. And if you see something with red eyes in the dark, don't move. Don't breathe. And don't look away. Reports still come in. In Sonora, in Coahuila, in Jalisco. Even across the border into Texas. Livestock dying. Kids vanishing. Shadows with glowing eyes. Some call it a demon. Others say it's a cryptid. But to the locals, it's more than a tale. It's a plague. A predator. A monster that feeds on fear and blood. They say when the goats cry, and the wind carries that strange clicking noise across the field, you'd better get inside. Because El Chupacabras doesn't kill out of hate. It kills out of need. And it's always hungry.